now. Detonate the reality bomb!
I will build a great, great wall.
Some alien race to come down and threaten us.
Is the singularity near?
The truth is out there.
The military-industrial complex.
The 7 mountains of the influencers of culture.
To be as gods, you know.
Change has come to America.
Catapult of propaganda.
From a secure location on top of the ridge in the heart of the beautiful Missouri Ozarks, this is A View from the Bunker. Now, here's Derek Gilbert.
The sun is shining and, although it is dropping down into the west, and that means it is time once again for A View from the Bunker Live. This week, the Jeffrey Epstein rabbit hole. Another researcher into wealthy pedophiles dies. And UFO researchers plan to storm Area 51. That plus this week's interview, archaeology is cool. Yes, digging in the Holy Land, our subject for our interview segment tonight. Director of Excavations for the Associates of Biblical Research, Dr. Scott Stripling joins us tonight. So, pull up your chair, grab a cup of coffee, or whatever beverage you choose, and get ready. This is A View from the Bunker for July 14th, 2019. I'm Derek Gilbert. By the way, tonight going to be a shorter program, because immediately following this program, which will end tonight at about 8:15 p.m. Central Time, maybe 8:20, but at 8:30 p.m. Central Time, which is UTC minus 6, or if you're listening elsewhere in the world, kind of calculate the time zone difference there. At 8:30 p.m. tonight, I'll be joining Jim Paris live and his syndicated radio program, as we'll be discussing my brand new book, Bad Moon Rising, Islam, Armageddon, and the Most Dangerous Double Cross in History. So instead of running our program for 2 hours and going until 9 p.m. Central, the only way we could accommodate doing this live and that live is to cut this program short by about 45 minutes. But that's okay. It means 45 minutes less blather from me and more of a focus on our guest tonight coming up in, just about 10, 12 minutes from now. So a couple of things this week to point out. By the way, just a quick housekeeping, the usual boilerplate opening for the show. We thank you for listening tonight, whether it's at Spreaker.com. And by the way, the chat room at Spreaker is now open, if you've got us there. iHeartRadio, Stitcher.com, Spotify.com. Of course, you can listen live with the little radio player in the right-hand column at vftb.net. If you're listening via time shift, via podcast, you can subscribe to the View from the Bunker podcast at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and we've got links to do all of those things at vftb.net, which is, of course, our global hub for this particular program. The mobile app. We've got a free mobile app. That's the easiest way to do it. Just download the programs automatically directly to your smartphone or tablet. We've got apps free of charge for both iOS devices or Android devices, and links at the website that take you directly to the iTunes App Store and Google Play Store. And again, the website, vftb.net. We're also on YouTube. We send the audio over there. So if you prefer using YouTube, the channel is youtube.com/Derek Gilbert. And on social media, you'll find the View from the Bunker page at facebook.com/View from the Bunker. On Twitter, at View from Bunker or at Derek Gilbert. I answered either one. So now that that's out of the way, again, a shorter show tonight, so we're going to move quickly through the news of the week. And the one item that seems to be on everybody's mind right now, and rightly so, is the arrest of billionaire Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, the big question is, why did Jeffrey Epstein get off in 2008? It appeared that there was a nice gift-wrapped case that had been prepared against him for sexual assaults on underage girls, or pedophilia. And for some reason, the U.S. attorney handling the case was, it appears, directed by somebody to cut a deal. Now, this has a lot of tentacles, and it's interesting to see how the media and the politicians are trying to spin it, probably for a couple of reasons. First of all, the media and the Democrats want to see if this can hurt Donald Trump, because the U.S. attorney in the case back in 2008 was Alex Acosta. Acosta was Donald Trump's Secretary of Labor until just this past week, when the pressure on him to resign became overwhelming. He probably was advised to resign by the White House. Certainly wouldn't be surprised. And so he has stepped down. That is entirely appropriate. But I think the question then is, why did Epstein choose to cut a deal with, or rather, why did Acosta choose to cut a deal with Epstein? Because he could have been in prison all of this time instead of free to continue his activities as he is alleged to have done. An even bigger question, why was this a federal case? Because according to what I've read, what he is charged with was actually a state crime. So why did a federal prosecutor, then U.S. Attorney Alex Acosta, get involved? Was this kicked upstairs, and then was Acosta directed to cut a deal, rather than to go to trial and prosecute Jeffrey Epstein? According to some observers who are looking at this, and I've not had the time this week, as working on the next book already, to dig deeply into this, but it does appear that Jeffrey Epstein was more than just a wealthy pedophile with the resources to indulge his sick sexual preferences. It appears as though Epstein's real job was to obtain blackmail material on other wealthy power players. And it appears that he was quite a success. As you probably know, former President Bill Clinton felt compelled to immediately release a statement. We talked about this last week, saying, I was only on his plane 4 times, in spite of flight logs that suggest otherwise, more like 26. This plane, dubbed the Lolita Express by members of the press corps, Lolita, a reference to a 1950s novel and early 60s movie, directed by Stanley Kubrick, interestingly enough. Lolita has become a euphemism for a young girl is used for sexual purposes. Now, there are people who have been chasing this a lot longer than I have, and some of this stuff I knew 10, 12 years ago and had forgotten. Things kind of slide down the memory hole as new stuff gets piled in front. Epstein, of course, owns a private island in the Caribbean, Little St. James Island, if I remember correctly. But on that island, there is a very strange, well, I can't think of another word for it other than temple, with a dome on top and some strange geometric markings on it. A lot of speculation of what's inside and what's below it. I don't have enough information to even go there, but it is odd. People on the nearby island who had been, many of whom had been hired as workmen to help construct whatever Epstein had built there, basically keeping their mouths shut, according to reporters who've been down there asking questions this past week. So, Liberty Blitzkrieg and Mike Krieger writing a lot about this past week. You can find his stuff at the Liberty Blitzkrieg blog. It's also picked up and republished at zerohedge.com, which is one of the news sites that I look at on a regular basis. According to Krieger, who cites a report by that was published in the Daily Beast, and normally the Daily Beast, very left wing, but they are running they've run a number of articles by journalist Vicky Ward, who's been chasing the Jeffrey Epstein story since 2003. 2003. Ward reported in the Daily Beast that the Trump transition team had asked Acosta about why he offered a deal to Epstein back in 2008, when there was enough evidence, apparently, to send him away for a long time. And Epstein replied to the Trump team that I was told, and this is a quote from the article now at the Daily Beast, I was told Epstein belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. So for almost 20 years, for some reason, this may explain why Epstein has been free to pursue his activities for the last 20 years. Now, Ann Coulter was interviewed on Breitbart News, their Sirius XM channel, a couple of nights ago. And Ann Coulter has speculated that there may be a state actor behind all of this. Don't know, but the fact that he's been free to pursue his activities for as long as he has in a rather high-profile fashion, suggests that perhaps Epstein has recordings on people who were going with him to his island or to his homes in Palm Beach or Manhattan. People who were paying him to participate. A lot of questions about the Jeffrey Epstein story. And again, I don't have enough information to go any further than to just ask these questions. But I suggest that you keep a close eye on the news and look a little deeper into the news over the next couple of weeks. This may get swept under the rug, or it may be that Epstein's protection has evaporated for some reason. I would like to think that it's because the Trump administration is actually draining the swamp. But we don't know, because we just don't know what's going on. In fact, we don't know what we don't know. But this is one of those scandals that could be one of the darker chapters in the history of the American political elite. Something up there in the order of the Franklin scandal, the Franklin cover-up. And speaking of this, by the way, a 40-year-old woman who's been digging into this for some time, and well-known, I guess, not I guess, but she is well-known among alternative media and deep state researchers. Tracy Twyman died just recently. Again, she's only 40 years old. Now, this happens, but the fact that she had sent out videos to a couple of friends, a copy of a video to a couple of friends, which have now been made public, that she feared for her life because of some reporting that she did with some programs that she did on her own video channel about Isaac Cappy, who was and his death back in May 13th. Isaac Cappy was a Hollywood actor, had a couple of small roles in films, who had become very vocal recently about pedophilia in Hollywood. And suddenly Cappy turns up dead, and now just over a month later, Tracy Twyman turns up dead. She was a producer for Clyde Lewis on his Ground Zero radio broadcast, was the founder of a website that had some really interesting and deep research called Dagobert's Revenge. No details, at least not that I found yet, on her sudden passing. But again, a woman digging into pedophilia, expressing fear for her life, and then suddenly passing at the age of 40. It makes you ask whether something more is going on here. One final note, as we kind of do an abbreviated section on the news this week, UFO researchers and enthusiasts have been volunteering to storm Area 51. The hashtag Area 51 has gone viral on Twitter. Some 750,000 saying that they're interested in staging a mass raid on this site out in Nevada. U.S. Air Force is taking this seriously. Spokeswoman Laura McAndrews saying she would like to discourage anyone from trying to come into the area where we train American armed forces, not to mention test secret aircraft. So we shall see what happens. I don't think the government is going to look on this very kindly. The military will look on this very kindly. They will probably defend the borders of Area 51 a little more energetically than they've been defending the border along the Rio Grande. Just saying. We shall see. I don't think there's anything extraterrestrial hidden inside Area 51. But again, it's one of those things that we don't know what we don't know. I will say this. It is interesting that there's a lot in the media over the last 18 months regarding the Navy's encounters with craft that they don't recognize. But just remember, just because a pilot doesn't recognize it, if it's a secret government craft, does not automatically mean it's extraterrestrial. So we turn to a different type of research and science, archaeology, and specifically digging in the Holy Land. As we talk about archaeological work at Shiloh and other biblical sites, and the challenges of working in an area that the rest of the world claims belongs to the Palestinians. That's straight ahead on A View from the Bunker.
Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourself for the most unique special offer in SkyWatch TV history. We proudly announce the Vault Declassified Special Collection. For your $35 donation during this very limited time offer, you'll receive the new book by Pentagon analyst Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, Progressive Evil: How Radicals Are Redefining America's Rights, Making Her Globally Irrelevant for the End Times. Derek P. Gilbert's astonishing new book is not available anywhere else and comes completely loaded with hundreds of... But we're still not done. SkyWatch TV's off-the-record series...
Desolation, beginning of the world to this time.
Proportions. Dr. Thomas Horn says you cannot understand much of the Bible unless you read and grasp the revelations in the Gods of War Super Collection. For your $35 donation during this very limited time offer, you'll receive The Alliance of Evil, the groundbreaking new book by Pentagon analyst Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis, which unveils the prophetic new and the battle. And that's not all. You'll also receive for a very limited time the best of the first annual Blessed Hope Prophecy Conference on DVD. This 2-disc DVD collection is jam-packed with over 11 hours of mind-boggling revelations from presenters like Dr. Thomas R. Horn on deep state saboteurs and the secret destiny of America, Sharon Gilbert on the return of the ancients through pharmakia, necromancy, and virtual reality, Lieutenant Colonel Robert McGinnis on the inside war against President Trump by elite secret societies, and unforgettable presentations from celebrated theologian Dr. Michael Lake, Derek P. Gilbert, Josh Peck, and more. But we're still not done. SkyWatch TV's off-the-record series is back by popular demand with a brand new, never-before-aired DVD, The Gods of War Edition, featuring exclusive interviews with Detective Carl Gallups, Senior Pentagon analyst Robert McGinnis, Derek and Sharon Gilbert on the coming hyper battle between the forces of God and the titans of biblical prophecy. This content is only available in this exclusive offer and will not be aired anywhere else. Included for a limited time with the Gods of War Super Collection. This unprecedented collection, sold separately, holds a retail value of $220. All 6 items, yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. This, without a doubt, is the largest special offer of the summer and is available only while supplies last. So don't delay. The Gods of War Super Collection, available now at SkyWatchTVStore.com. Order online or call 1-844-750-4985. Does God use catastrophe to mobilize His people for His glory? Is there finally definitive evidence of the actual location of Mount Sinai, the very place where God's presence was revealed in a blazing fire? New York Times best-selling author, filmmaker, and teacher Joel Richardson is back with 2 brand new works that take these subjects head-on. SkyWatch TV is proud to announce the Joel Richardson 2-book special offer. This special offer includes The Mystery of Catastrophe, where you'll learn to view catastrophes in an entirely new light. You will see firsthand how God uses natural and man-made disasters to specifically position people to hear the gospel of the one and only true God and receive salvation through His Son, Jesus Christ. This must-read book will walk you step by step down the eschatological road of biblical prophecies to offer meaning and hope to individuals that are suffering. In this timely 2-book special offer, you'll also receive Mount Sinai in Arabia, the true location revealed. Complete with more than 50 full-color photographs and maps, this beautiful work takes a look at the biblical evidence for Mount Sinai being in the land of Midian, Mount Sinai in ancient Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions, the evidence that Paul journeyed to Mount Sinai, the discovery of Moses' altar, the golden calf, and so much more. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of $40. Yours now for your donation of only $25 plus shipping and handling. Now's your chance to get both of these incredible new books at one super low price. Order the Joel Richardson special offer online now at the SkyWatch TV store or call 844-750-4985.
living proof that the best laid plans of mice and men oft go astray. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Skype is great when it works. And when it doesn't, well, boy, it really, really doesn't. But I think we've got that sorted. So we're ready for an interesting conversation. One of my personal passions, although not enough to actually get out into the field and do it myself, but is what archaeologists in the field turn up and discover. Turning over stones is an amazing thing. And what I've learned over the last few years of research and writing is that archaeology is supporting the history that is recorded in the Bible. And our guest is turning over stones in one of the most important historic sites in the Bible, and thus one of the most important sites in Israel's history. He's the director of excavations for the Associates for Biblical Research at, let's see if I can pronounce this correctly, Khirbet, el-Maqatir, and Shiloh, Israel. I'm pretty sure I got Shiloh right. He's the author of The Trowel and the Truth, A Guide to Field Archaeology in the Holy Land. His website is scottstripling.net. We are honored to welcome to the program for the first time Dr. Scott Stripling. Scott, welcome.
Hey, Derek. I'm thrilled to be with you.
Well, appreciate you making the extra effort to get here. We've been fighting through the servers at Skype in order to make the connection, but I'm glad we did. We were at Shiloh just 2 months ago, Sharon and I leading the SkyWatchTV tour there, and I guess we missed your arrival there with your team from ABR and the volunteers that work with you by just a few days.
Yeah, you must have just missed us.
Well, yeah, and that's it was, to me, one of the most intriguing, one of the most important sites that we've seen as we've gone to Israel these last 2 years. That was where the tabernacle sat for 369 years, but just the layout of the land I thought was fascinating. What is it about Shiloh that you find significant? Why is Shiloh an important archaeological site?
Well, it's a great test case for those who take the Bible as a serious historical document. I mean, we take these conquest sites mentioned in Joshua, like Jericho, Ai, Hatzor, Shiloh, and then when we excavate these sites, do we find a material culture that synchronizes with what we read in the biblical text? So it's a sort of a field laboratory, if you will. There's just hundreds of interesting things, from understanding the relationship of the transition from pre-Israelite to Israelite times, and then on in from First Temple period and the Second Temple period. And so just a lot of interesting synchronisms. But when it gets right down to it, Shiloh matters because of the tabernacle.
Now, what is the significance of the tabernacle? For Christians, we don't have, I think, a proper sense of what that means to Jews and to Israel's history. What is the significance of the tabernacle?
Right. Well, this was God's dwelling. I mean, he says in Jeremiah 7:12 to the prophet, "Go now to Shiloh, where I first caused my name to dwell." And so it's the house of God, the dwelling of God, and he causes his name and his presence to reside there at Shiloh in a tent, a mishkan, or a tent that is separated sort of on ratios of 2-to-1 from holy space to most holy space with progressive degrees of sanctity as one moves inward. And so that's super important because this is Israel's first capital, and it answers maybe the most basic of all human questions, which is, how do I connect with God? People have always needed to and wanted to connect with God, and through the sacrificial system that operated there, they had a way to mend their fractured vertical and horizontal relationships.
So what is it there at the site that convinces you that this is the actual site and that you know where the tabernacle stood?
Okay, well, those are two separate issues.
Okay.
We're confident that it is ancient Shiloh. Number one, we have inscription from the site. Number two, we have a biblical description, geographical description, both in Joshua and in Judges, that is very specific. And it was that description that Robinson followed that led him there in the mid-19th century. And no one has really, many sites are in dispute, but Shiloh really is not, because the biblical text is so specific, and now we're finding a material culture that matches it very closely.
So when did the Israelites arrive at Shiloh, and when did they leave?
Oh, that's a very good question. According to the Bible, the Israelites arrived at Shiloh around 1400 BC. And we get there from taking, say, 1 Kings 6:1, 1 Chronicles 6:33, Judges 11:26. Those are just three scriptures that come to mind that point to the mid-15th century BC for an exodus from Egypt, a 40-year wilderness wandering, a 6-year conquest. So then that puts you at the end of the conquest at Shiloh, let's say at the beginning of the 14th century, maybe around 1399.
So they went there pretty much right after arriving there and then setting up the altar of Joshua. And I want to talk about that a little bit deeper into the conversation here. But they set up the altar right there or the tabernacle there at Shiloh, and it remained there pretty much down to the time of David and Solomon then.
Right. The Mishkan is erected, according to Joshua 18:1, at Shiloh. Now, Joshua is from the tribe of Ephraim, and Shiloh is located in Ephraim tribal territory. And so that may have had something to do with the reason for the placement. It was also central to the country. Earlier, you mentioned that it was there for 369 years. Now, that's a number that comes from the Seder Olam, from the Talmudic literature of the 2nd century A.D., and that's the number that, a lot of people use. But I just want to point out that that's not the calculations that one gets from the Bible itself. From the biblical text, you arrive at a date closer to 300 years, or a little over 3 centuries, is what I'm comfortable with saying.
Okay. And then the tabernacle was then moved after was it moved after the Philistines destroyed Shiloh and captured the ark?
Yes. So once the ark is taken from Shiloh to the Battle of Ebenezer, and then, of course, captured by the Philistines, and it's among them for 7 months, finally returned to the Israelites, it never goes back to Shiloh. It ends up at Gibeon and is operating still for a couple of generations before David pitches his tent in Jerusalem, and then the ark is moved there.
The history in the Bible and the history going back that far has a lot of political implications, even down to the present day. And again, for us Americans, where houses that are 100 years old get like special plaques mounted on the wall because they're special, thinking about things that happened 3,000 years ago as still impacting the situation on the ground today is kind of strange for us. For example, on our tour of Israel, we visited the Samaritan enclave on Mount Gerizim. And as I understand it, the Samaritans and their small community still believe that the tabernacle was moved illegally by Eli, if I remember the story correctly, the high priest who raised Samuel. So they claim that they've got the true faith. Of course, there's all sorts of political implications when you start digging in Israel as regards Muslims and their claim to the Temple Mount. How difficult is it for you as an archaeologist to work in what the rest of the world calls the West Bank?
Well, you're right. And nothing is simple in the Middle East, in particular when we're in the so-called West Bank or Area C or the disputed territories or Judea, Samaria. Each one has its own political connotation. And, we live in the tension of all those worlds. So we try to coexist and to be a light, quite frankly, to everyone that we encounter. There are political issues, but we've been able to navigate it and build friendships on all sides of the political spectrum. At Shiloh, we are in a Jewish community, essentially. So there's a large security fence that goes around the modern community and the ancient Tel. So it's very, very secure, which is different from where we've excavated in the past, which, vandalism and so forth was a big problem.
You would think that since And maybe I don't quite understand the mindset, but you would think that the Palestinian Authority would encourage more archaeology to encourage more tourism, because that would be good for the local economy. What has been the working relationship between you and whatever Palestinian authorities or representatives that you need to interface with?
Well, we do not work under the PA, so the PA is in charge of Area A,
right?
And which would be Jericho, Nazareth, Hebron, certain areas. But our excavations are in Area C, so we are under what's called the civil administration in the territories. We would have no problem if we felt like we wanted to do a dig in the PA territories. I would have no problem working with them, though.
Okay. The lay of the land at Shiloh, the thing that impressed me about it was that the site where the tabernacle stood is not the highest piece of ground in that area. And I found that really intriguing based on the comparison to the cosmology of the pagan nations around ancient Israel, where their gods always seem to pick the highest point, like Mount Hermon or Mount Zaphon up in the north, or to create artificial mountains to give them an elevated place above the hoi polloi. Yet at Shiloh, and even in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount is not the highest peak in Jerusalem either. I found that to be really intriguing. Why didn't God direct the Israelites to put the tabernacle or the temple on the highest spot?
Okay, well, first of all, we don't know where the tabernacle was at Shiloh. I realize that when you go there, there's signage that points to the location of the tabernacle, but that's for tourists.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you clarified that. That's good to know.
It may have been there, but we don't have proof of that. The northern platform was introduced by Charles Wilson in 1866 on behalf of the PEQ, and Wilson theorized because this platform more or less reflected the dimensions of the biblical tabernacle, that it would have been an ideal place. And that has risen and fallen, that idea. But in the 1980s, Kaufman reintroduced it, and it's really gotten traction since then. There's been some excavation now on the northern platform, and people have found, archaeologists before my team, found what they believed were cup marks in the bedrock that could have been for the posts of the tabernacle. But the thing they don't tell you is that everywhere we excavate in Israel, we find cut marks in the bedrock. It's just a natural feature. So we really don't have any proof that it was on the northern platform. I like the summit, quite frankly, the top of, if you can picture where the big museum is,
right,
the spaceship-looking structure, immediately to the south of that is the summit of Shiloh. And for a couple of reasons, that makes sense. In our area D on the east of the site, there's a massive bone deposit, about half the size of a gymnasium, only bones from the biblical sacrificial system, full of late Bronze Age pottery from the period when the tabernacle was in operation. If the tabernacle is operating on the summit, and we measured it, it would fit perfectly there, then it's very logical that they're depositing what we would call a fabisa, or a sacred deposit. They're walking downhill and dumping these bones and this pottery over the edge. If it's on the northern platform, then they're carrying all of this stuff uphill and then dumping it over the edge, which seems to be a little counterintuitive. But there have been three major theories of where the tabernacle was, and then I've introduced a fourth possibility. Well, maybe we hope that more excavation will clarify this.
Any ideas to how long it might take to find or identify a specific location?
Well, we don't have any guarantees that we would ever be able to do that. I mean, the Mishkan was made of animal skins, which would have decomposed. There were other things, accoutrements like clasps and sockets and pomegranates and storage rooms that we are excavating that point to what I would call a verisimilitude, a matching material culture to what you read in the text. And listen, when we're dealing with Shiloh, we only have the Bible. We can't look at sources in Egypt or Mesopotamia. We have the biblical text. So the big question is, have we found it to be reliable from what we've excavated? And we really are. I mean, I just published a major article in Israel about 2 weeks ago on a ceramic pomegranate that we excavated last year. And the pomegranate is a motif of the tabernacle. Mm-hmm. And you'll remember that on the priest's garments, they had bells and pomegranates alternating around the hem of their garment. And it continues to be a motif even into Solomon's temple. You have 100 pomegranates that adorn Solomon's temple. So we actually have 2 that we've excavated and that we've published. We also have this bone deposit that I'm talking about. And listen, these bones have more from the right side of the animal than from the left side of the animal. And if one is a Bible reader, of course, that should trigger us, because Leviticus 7 says that the right side belongs to the priest. It's the priestly portion. And what are we finding? The majority of the bones are from the right side of the animal. So these types of things begin to add up. You know, we have storage rooms that encircle the whole site. That's what we're excavating right now. And there's no other site in Israel that has storage rooms around the entire perimeter. Why Shiloh? Why is it different? Well, how did people tithe in biblical times? Well, I mean, they didn't go to tabernacle.org and make a secure online donation. I mean,
they didn't take PayPal back in the day, right? Yeah,
they brought bushels and barrels, and so it's just what you would expect to find. So it's storage rooms, it's bone deposit, it's ceramic pomegranates that after 3 seasons, the evidence is beginning to mount.
Dr. Scott Stripling is our guest on A View from the Bunker. He's the director of excavations at Khirbet el-Maqatir. Is that correct?
That's pretty close. Yes.
As well as Shiloh. Not bad for a Gentile, I suppose. What is it that led you to this particular calling?
That's a great question. I was a Bible reader from my childhood, and as I read the text and took it seriously, I was just obsessed with the background. And I felt like a lot of the issues that we struggled with understanding had to do with material culture. We were not understanding the metaphors and the idioms, the figures of speech and so forth, because we didn't understand the material culture. So I just consumed everything I could get my hands on, ultimately went to seminary, studied as much as I could about the material culture. And when it got right down to it, that's what I felt like God wanted me to do. I had a unique skill set, a solid understanding of the Bible, and a unique skill set archaeologically that would enable me to make a difference in this field. So that's when I began to move this direction.
The work of the Associates for Biblical Research, your website has been a great resource to me over the last several years as I've tried to educate myself on how the archaeological discoveries in and around the Holy Land support the history that we read in the Bible. In a broader sense, what is the mission of ABR, and how is what you all are finding and presenting to the world, how consistent is it with what we read in the biblical text?
3 Ds: dig, discover, and defend. Those summarize what our mission is. ABR has just completed our 40th year of work in the highlands of Israel. So we've established relationships over decades that are deep, strong, meaningful relationships. This is the 3rd site that we've excavated in the highlands of Israel. And so we don't it's not that I understand Shiloh in isolation. I understand it in a regional setting, of understanding that larger material culture. Ultimately, we have engaged in the arena of ideas regarding the reliability of the biblical text. And unfortunately, we have at least half of the archaeologists in Israel are very secular, and they do not take the Bible as a serious historical document. And so that's the arena that we've engaged in. And we feel like the evidence is very consistent with what we read in the Bible, and we have an opportunity now to engage these people. I have a reporter tomorrow calling me from a major Israeli newspaper wanting to do an article, and then it juxtaposes our view, a high view of Scripture, as connecting with archaeology as opposed to, say, the minimalist view. And so that's our mission, is to do good scientific archaeology. We're evangelicals, and so we're doing this from a faith perspective.
It's interesting that so many of the Israeli archaeologists and well-known and respected archaeologists are still secular. I am a little baffled by that. I think most of us lay people would assume that scientists taking a methodical approach to analyzing the evidence would interpret it in a way that is fair and unbiased. How realistic a view is that? In other words, are there those who will filter through a presupposition that the Bible is just a collection of myths and fairy tales?
Yes, unfortunately, there's a proclivity toward skepticism. And even among our Jewish friends, the majority of the view is skeptical, that the Bible is mythology, that it's not to be taken too seriously. A few years ago, I was lecturing at Hebrew University to a classroom full of archaeology students. Now, these are graduate students, master's and PhD level students. And I talked to them for 45 minutes, just like you and I are talking about the Bible and archaeology. You know, I had kind of some fancy slides and I used some bigger words maybe, but at the end, they just lined up to talk to me. The students were enthralled. They wanted to shake my hand and talk. They said, "This is the most amazing thing we've ever heard. You're the first one all year to use the Bible in our classroom." Now, this is in Jerusalem, Hebrew University, the future leaders in the field of archaeology, and no one has used the Bible all year long. I call that an anti-biblical bias. And it's worse at other universities, like Tel Aviv University, for example.
One of the archaeologists whose name I've heard you mention, and I just watched your YouTube channel at Associates for Biblical Research, the recent interview you did about the altar of Joshua. And we visited a couple of sites on our tour back in May. Not just there, but we also went to el-Awat, which he connected to the general hired by the Canaanite king of Hatzor, Sisera, the guy who got the tent peg in his head. That was especially interesting to Sharon and me because last year we went from Israel to Sardinia, and so we saw the Nuragic architecture that he connected to the site there near Megiddo at el-Awat. Zertal, Adam Zertal, the late archaeologist, passed away in 2015. You had a discussion recently at the ABR, the weekly channel on the program that you all record there at ABR about the site of Joshua's altar there at Mount Ebal. How did his research affect Dr. Zertal and his view of the Bible?
Okay, well, let me first just remind your listeners of the chronology. So the Israelites enter, they camp, they're at Shittim in Jordan, in the plains of Moab, Joshua 2:1. They cross over, they camp at Gilgal. From Gilgal, they have victory at Jericho. They're defeated at Ai. Then they have victory at Ai. And, of course, that's a site that we excavated. And then they immediately go to where? To Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. Moses told them, when you come into the land and you gain a foothold, you're going to build an altar on Mount Ebal. And so from Ai, in the middle of the conquest, or really the beginning of the conquest, they go and they have this covenant renewal ceremony. And then the conquest continues from that point. So Mount Ebal is another one of those sites, like Jericho, Ai, Hatzor, Shiloh, then Mount Ebal, that we can learn from and calibrate, if you will, the biblical chronology. Now, what did Zertal learn from there? He was a skeptic from Tel Aviv University, which is, the most secular of the Israeli universities. He was an academic. He was a war hero. But he had never been exposed to the idea that the Bible could be taken as a serious historical document. What he found at Mount Ebal changed his mind. And from there on, the rest of his life, he did see the Bible as a serious historical document.
And the site there at Mount Ebal, what was it about that site that he found so convincing?
Well, he found an altar, and the Bible says that Joshua built an altar on Mount Ebal. Now, the altar that he found was quite large and rectangular with a ramp going up, and the pottery that he found, he knew his pottery as a good archaeologist. He saw that it was Iron 1, which is the period that many believe that the Israelites entered into the land. That's not the biblical date, but that's the period that many archaeologists would hold to. So Zertal found this rectangular altar. He ultimately excavated it. Now, when he excavated through the rectangular altar, guess what he found at the perfect geometric center? Well, if you saw my interview, you know what he found. He found a round earlier altar at the perfect geometric center. In other words, that later altar was covering and venerating the earlier altar. And it was that earlier altar that I believe was Joshua's altar on Mount Ebal.
What evidence was found there to indicate that this was used by the Israelites and not the native Canaanites?
Okay, well, first of all, do we have evidence of 15th century occupation? And yes, we do. There was a scarab of Tutmosis III found at the lowest level in Stratum 2. What I would argue needs to be, Stratum 2 should be subdivided into A and B. But anyway, in his Stratum 2, so that's evidence of 15th century. Well, what they say, Derek, when scarabs are found that authenticate the biblical date, they say, well, they must be commemorative scarabs. They must, later peoples must have created those because the Bible couldn't possibly be dating it correctly, right? We also have at that lowest level these stone hammers and this pit, what's called Pit 250 on surface 61. And this is all inside that round altar, which is about 6.5 feet wide, of uncut field stone. And also an Egyptian stylized earring that dates to the late Bronze Age, and a pumice chalice. And what is very interesting is that pumice chalice is almost identical to one that was found in Egypt at Avaris, which is where the Israelite epicenter of the Israelite Exodus was from.
Right, that was the capital city of the Hyksos.
You got it. And at Avaris, by the way, in Stratum 11, you have this abandonment phase that Betok calls it. So it's a clear Semitic population that is beyond dispute. And then there's an abandonment phase. And when? In the 15th century, exactly when the Bible says that it happened.
So Thutmose III, who was the Napoleon of ancient Egypt, probably was the pharaoh before the Exodus?
Yes, I would call him the pharaoh of the oppression.
Okay.
And I would see Amenhotep II as the pharaoh of the Exodus.
I'm glad you said that. One of the things I find most fascinating is that the location of that site there at the Mount Ebal is right next to the ancient city of Shechem. Shechem was one of the cities that was sacred to the ancient Semitic god Resheph, the plague god, an archer who was adopted by Amenhotep II as his personal protector god. But besides being a plague god, he was also considered a special protector of chariot warriors. And how did God free the Israelites? By sending plagues and then destroying the chariots of the Pharaoh. And then once they get into the Holy Land, God sends Joshua and the Israelites right there to this city that was supposed to... And we know this from ancient text from ancient Ebla, dating back to the mid-3rd millennium BC. So... something going on in the spirit realm beyond what's obvious in the biblical text.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Notice what the Bible says, that when they come to, well, they're between Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, so we assume that they're at Shechem, right?
Right.
And there is no opposition. The Shechemites, even though they're living there, they don't fight the Israelites. They confederate with them. And what the text says is very interesting. All of Israel joined in together, alien and citizen alike. So you see, what made you a Yahwehist, if you will, was not that you could trace your bloodline back to Abraham, but it's that you embraced monotheism. You embraced Yahweh as your God. And Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob all had deep roots there at Shechem. That's where Joseph's bones, are interred. There at Shechem. So it appears to me that Shiloh was part of the Shechem city-state in the late Bronze Age, because at Shiloh, the Bible records no conflict either, but we know from the archaeology that there were people living there.
Letters found in Egypt as part of the Amarna letters, indicating a very active polity there based in that area as well.
Labayu, king of Shechem. Yeah. Absolutely.
So fascinating.
And so
yeah.
I would see it this way, Derek. Let's say you have in this Bronze Age city-state system, you have Hatzor, Megiddo, Jerusalem, and Shechem. And they control the areas. They're regional city-states. And so the central Shechem city-state that extends down and takes in Ephraim and Manasseh territory later, but that includes Shiloh. So the Israelites are resisted and fought in the Megiddo and the Jerusalem and in the Hatzor regions. But in the area of the Shechem city-state, they're not. They're confederated with them.
Now, let me turn to another site that you worked at. And again, this was something I picked up by watching the Digging for Truth YouTube channel from Associates for Biblical Research. You did some work at Tal el-Hammam, which is over on the Jordan side, just a few miles from Mount Nebo. Earlier this year, I interviewed Dr. Philip Sylvia, who's scientific director there at Tal el-Hammam, which was abandoned by the time the Israelites came into the land, but several hundred years earlier, the time of Abraham and Lot, it was one of the largest cities in the Levant. What did you find there, and how do you interpret the dig site there at Tal el-Hammam?
Tal el-Hammam is a very large and important site in the Bronze Age. It's probably the largest site in the southern Levant throughout much of the Bronze Age. Fascinating site. Large early Bronze Age city, which we would call the first great age of cities, and continuous occupation really until you've got a gap down in the late Bronze Age. But there's numerous springs on the site, and so people are not going to leave a site that has water, and then a large Middle Bronze Age city there. So what Collins found there at Hammam was a large destruction in the Middle Bronze Age. About 1650 BC is where they would date it. And we have a similar phenomenon at Shiloh. Our site is built around 1700, 1750. We've got a destruction layer around that same time period. Anyway, he attributes that to Sodom and Gomorrah, or to that being Sodom, of course, is his argument. The challenge is that doesn't match any known biblical chronology. And so they've kind of created their own chronology, starting with archaeology and then working toward the text, or I think what Steve would call an honorific dating system. The two schools of thought of how you date, Abraham, would be primarily following the Masoretic text, which would put you around 2000 BC, and then following the Septuagint dating of, say, Exodus 12:40, that would put you around, say, 1800 BC. And when we started the dig, that's what we were kind of going from the Septuagint reading. Well, it turned out that the archaeology did not fit that. It was late. And so that's when their dating scheme sort of changed, and that's when I changed my view that it was a good candidate for Sodom. Now, it's possible that underneath that Middle Bronze Age city, there is a destruction in the early Bronze city that, with time, we might find out does match really nicely the biblical time of Sodom.
Are there any references in any texts from elsewhere in the ancient Near East that make reference to that particular site? No, because we don't know what the ancient name was. Gotcha. Right.
We have the modern name Tal el-Hammam. Everyone's pretty certain that this is Shittim of Joshua 2:1, Joshua 3:1, Numbers 25:1. But more ancient than that, we're just not positive what the name was.
Okay. The folks that you get working with you at Shiloh. And I've watched your Shiloh Network News videos, or some of them anyway, and it looks like you got a pretty interesting group of volunteers coming out there. I saw some very musically talented folks. One of the video clips showed people practicing their work with slings. Where do your crews come from? How do people get involved? Is it possible for volunteers to take part in the dig at Shiloh?
Yes, they can go to digshiloh.org. All the details are there. We've been blessed to have the largest dig in the Middle East for the last 3 years. So very large team, and where our structure is set up in such a way that we can always take more people. It's a very exciting site, and we're in a very interesting context. We have a very efficient and well-run operation, and it's a real positive experience for people to be a part of. We have 11 universities that are participating in our consortium, and these are schools from, say, Lee University, University of Northwestern at St. Paul, University of Pikeville, the Bible Seminary, which is my school, and others that are participating with us. So we have regular folks who are just either retired or in different stations of life who come and volunteer, and then we have universities who participate within our consortium. And we also partner with 4 Israeli universities in one form or another. So it's a pretty dynamic environment.
The worship that you all did, I saw a video of your group engaging in worship there at Shiloh. Again, I found that site to be really significant and meaningful. What was it like there to engage in worship on a location where, even if we don't know exactly the site, that the tabernacle of God, his home on earth, was there somewhere on that location some 3,400 years ago?
It's awesome. I mean, I often think of Psalm 102:14. Blessed are those who love your dust and cherish your stones. I mean, what we're doing is difficult work, from 4 a.m. until who knows when we get to bed. But the dust and the stones and the pottery and every object that we find, it's very meaningful to me, because you're talking about Hannah was there, and Eli and Samuel and Joshua. This is very sacred soil, if you will. Our volunteers are unique, and often I'll have Israeli archaeologists say, how do you get these people to work so hard? Hey, they see our work ethic and what we're accomplishing, and it's because they're vision-driven. I mean, they have come there because they really want to be a part of digging into their own faith roots. So it's pretty cool.
One of the videos, or at least a section of one of the videos you shot there at Shiloh, featured a presentation from Lane Rittmeyer, and I've seen his name and looked at his website from time to time. What is his work, and how does his unique skill set contribute to what we know about the ancient Near East?
So Lane Rittmeyer is a member of my dig staff, and I have what I call a dream team working with me. We just have the most amazing team put together, and using the most cutting-edge technology and with just this incredible group of volunteers. But Lane in particular is our dig architect, and he's the world's leading expert on the Temple Mount. And so his experience of detailing the Jewish quarter, for example, and as you know, many of the drawings that you see all over Israel were his drawings. So he just brings a lifetime of wealth of knowledge and experience. So as we're brainstorming and strategizing how the different walls that we're unearthing all fit together, he's just a great resource for me. And of course, when reporters find out that he's on site, they'll come by not only to talk to me, but they want to talk to him too.
His work makes it a lot easier for guys like me who don't have that background in the deep study of the archaeological world and the way buildings would have looked in 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 BC. His drawings help put the picture together so we can imagine what a particular site might have looked like back in the day. So having him involved as part of your work is really, really an asset.
Well, few people have the skill set that Lane has, but I asked him once, how do you know that that's a lime kiln? And he said something like, I've drawn 18 of them or something like that. So, once one has, and same thing with, we were once excavating a church, and when we would do the drawings, he kept nailing it before we excavated. He would anticipate what was going to be there. And I would say, Lane, how did you know that? And he said, well, when you've drawn dozens of these, you can take your life experience and extrapolate out very likely what you're going to find.
I guess as an architect, you also know that when you're building a building, you have to do certain things in a certain way, even, 3,000, 4,000 years ago.
That's right. And we see uniquenesses in each time period, but the basics are the same. There's basic physics that come into play.
Where would people volunteer? Where would they get more information if they're interested in volunteering for one of your digs?
Sure. They can go to our website, digshiloh.org, or they can connect with me through my website, scottstripling.net. And as you mentioned, they can find all of our videos on Shiloh Network News. And all the cool stuff that we're doing also through our website, digshiloh.org.
Well, what's the most surprising thing that you've dug up, and where was it?
Well, I guess we'll focus on Shiloh just to limit the discussion a bit, since we have been, because there's a lot. Just think about it at Shiloh. Every day we excavate 2,000 pieces of pottery, 10 to 12 coins, about 40 to 50 other objects that we're going to record, and then walls, and we're doing scientific testing and, architectural analysis and all these other things simultaneously. But to answer your question, what would be the most interesting thing? The pomegranates that just got published, those are very interesting, these small ceramic pomegranates, because the Bible specifically, mentions pomegranates as a motif of the tabernacle. This season, just a few weeks ago, we excavated 3 horns from an altar. So it appears that there was a 4-horned altar. Well, we know there was, the Bible says, but it appears that we have part of it, or at least of an altar. I can't prove that this is the altar yet, but we are now going to be publishing those. So that's very interesting, to be finding horns from an altar at a site like Shiloh, and from a level of destruction, incidentally, which we now have this layer of destruction, which I would theorize was the Philistine destruction of Shiloh, that I would date to, say, 1075 or thereabouts. And in that level, in that matrix, is where we're now finding these horns, and also the ceramic pomegranate is very close to that. So all this cultic material is congregated pretty closely into one area of our field, H1.
Fascinating stuff. Now, I see that you are putting together a tour of Israel. It's coinciding with your dig season next year, May 8th through 17th, with our good friend Aaron Lipkin of Lipkin Tours.
Yes, we do a pre-dig tour and a post-dig tour every year, and that enables people that want to come on the dig, but they also want to tour. Then they can tour and then stay for the first week or two of the dig, or come and dig the last week or two and then stay for the post-dig tour. But our pre-dig tour will be partnering with Aaron this year. He's a dear friend of mine, and his real passion is in sort of the Judea, Samaria, particularly some ancient Samaria region. And I'm calling it the Backroads Tour of the Bible, or the Uncharted Tour, because we're going to mainly be going to places that tourists don't normally go. And so if that's appealing to your listeners, they should follow up and look into going with us, because, there's 30,000 archaeological sites in Israel, and how many times are you going to go to Masada, right? Or Megiddo? I mean, I could go endless times, and I do end up going 2 or 3 times every year to take people, but most people, after they've been a time or two, they would like to see some new stuff. And so that's basically what we'll be doing on that tour.
Yeah, and Aaron is great for that. He was really excited when we asked him, okay, can we put Joshua's altar on the tour this year? Can we go to el-Ahwat? Can we? And we've got some other sites for our tour next year, which we've moved to October, because we thought May this year would be good. Last year in May, the weather was comfortable. This year, we were in excess of 105, I think, 3 different times on the tour, and that got a little rough.
Oh, you should have tried excavating in that.
Well, see, that's why I would prefer to just read the published papers in the comfort of my office here at home.
Well, normally this is the first year that we've had that happen. Usually the first 2 weeks of our dig in May are nice and cool. People are wearing sweaters even in the morning. But this year the weather flip-flopped on us for some reason. Yeah, well, we'll pray that next May you guys have comfortable weather. Like I said, we decided to chicken out, and we went for October, hoping that we'll get some cooler weather then. Oh, you'll be safe in October. That's no problem. Should be good. I'll be back over there then speaking. I'm actually going in a few days back to Israel to speak at a conference. And then in October, I'll be back to speak at another conference. So the weather in October is excellent. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, we're looking forward to it, and appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. Again, curses on Skype for the difficulty in connecting tonight, but enjoyed the conversation. Dr. Scott Stripling is the author of The Trial and the Truth, a Guide to Field Archaeology in the Holy Land, and the Director of Excavations for the Associates for Biblical Research at Khirbet el-Maqatir. Now, I think I'm Maqatir? Well, you can either say it Maqatir if you're anglicizing it, or if you're pronouncing it like the rest of the world, it would be Maqatir.
Maqatir. Okay, well, see, that was my initial instinct. So there we go. And, of course, at Shiloh, his website, scottstripling.net, and I'll put links to that, a link to the information about his tour of Israel next May, and to his book in the show notes at vftb.net. Scott, hang on the line. We'll say goodbye off air, and you, dear listener, hang on for just a moment as we wrap up here on A View from the Bunker.
The victims of the human trafficking and sex trade industry have reached a boiling point around the world. But here in the United States, the demand has never been higher. Tragically, the massive growth of these unconscionable underground organizations is due in part to many citizens' disbelief that our modern society is capable of such atrocities, and live in a denial that these crimes are taking place here on our soil each and every day. SkyWatchTV and Whispering Ponies Ranch remain committed to providing ministry to the hurting, to the victims of abuses just like this and so much more. This is why we're proud to announce our new partnership with Yaku Buyans and 8 Days Ministry. In an effort to educate on these important topics and provide you with the tools needed to get engaged in the fight against sex trafficking, we present the 8 Days Special Collection. In this timely collection, you'll receive the cinematic movie inspired by actual events from director Yaku Buyans' 8 Days. This shocking presentation masterfully illustrates sequence by sequence how the victims of sex trafficking are often lured into entrapment, portrayed through the eyes of the lead characters. This incredible collection also includes the phenomenal book and companion workbook on disc, Woman of Influence, written by 8 Days screenwriter Philippa Buyans and lead actress Katie Walker. This 30-day devotional and companion workbook on disc is an inspiring, deeply affirming, and educational set that will encourage women to walk in the true identity of influence and purpose bestowed on them as daughters of the Most High God. But that's not all. You'll also receive on DVD the never-before-released, uncensored, off-the-record interview with the team behind the 8 Days movie, featuring Yaku and Philippa Buyans and actress Katie Walker as they disclose the hard-hitting realities of just how far the sex trafficking industry reaches, what the Trump administration has done to rescue thousands of victims, how the children of communities, including yours, may be at risk, and what you can do to fight back. Sold separately, this invaluable collection holds a retail value of $90. Yours now for your donation of only $35 plus shipping and handling. Sex trafficking is a difficult conversation, but ignoring it doesn't make it go away or help its victims. Understand this epidemic and learn how you can help by ordering the 8 Days Special Collection online now at the SkyWatch TV store or call 1-844-750-4985.
Live every Sunday night, this is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert. Again, a shorter program tonight as we are dropping off, well, about half an hour early in order to join the Jim Paris live radio program this evening as we're talking about my new book, Bad Moon Rising. Our thanks again to Dr. Scott Stripling for joining us, and thank you for your patience in putting up with the extra long first break that I had to kind of engineer on the fly as we tried to figure out why Skype wasn't allowing us to connect. Finally got through that. That was resolved eventually. And so, again, our appreciation to Scott Stripling and to you for sticking with us through the technical issues. A couple of new conferences to tell you about. Our schedule is filling up, and Sharon and I are grateful for that, and grateful to you for kind of following along with what we do. Of course, the Defender Conference from SkyWatch TV is coming up in just a few weeks. We're just, 3 weeks away now? Yeah, 3 weeks away. And, of course, it was sold out. It was sold out, but it happens that some additional seats have come available. And this is just something that popped up toward the end of last week. We very quickly recorded a video update that went out today for SkyWatch TV. So the word is out there. If you're interested in attending and seeing Dr. Michael Heiser, Joel Richardson, Pastor Carl Gallups, Lieutenant Colonel Bob McGinnis, Dr. Michael Lake, and then, of course, us from SkyWatch TV, me, Sharon, Josh Peck, Joe Horn, Josh is co-author on his book, Second Coming of the New Age, Stephen Bankars, and more. Don't wait. If you go through defenderconference.com, the website defenderconference.com, click the link. That may get you through to the tickets. I don't know if there are any available as of this broadcast right now. But if there are any and you prefer to call, I would call beginning at 9 a.m. Central Time tomorrow. That is 9 a.m. Central Time, UTC -6. And the ladies in the office there can get you set up. Again, the Defender Conference, August 2nd through 4th at the Radisson in Branson, Missouri. Just a few tickets that opened up toward the end of this past week. Don't wait, because those will sell out again very quickly. August 16th through 18th, just a month away, Sharon and I traveling to Lubbock, Texas, where we'll be speaking alongside Dr. Michael Heiser again. Also, Dr. Judd Burton, Dr. Aaron Judkins, Dr. Doug Hamp, Dr. Greg Reed, Pastor Dan Crestman, and more. The topic, of course, biblical giantology. So a fascinating topic. Some well-respected scholars, plus me, and only $5 registration for information on the Sons of God Giants of Old Conference, August 16th through the 18th. Log on to burtonbeyond.com. Now, a couple of new conferences to tell you about. Coming up in September, there's September 20th through 22nd, the Look, He is Coming with the Clouds Prophecy Conference. This is at Cross Point Church in Sanger, California. It is pastored by Pastor Dr. Greg Crocker. I will be there along with Troy Anderson, Pulitzer Prize nominated journalist and co-author of Trumpocalypse and the Babylon Code, and we'll essentially be teaching for the entire weekend. I think I'm doing 6 sessions. This is, again, Cross Point Church, Sanger, California. It's in the Fresno area, September 20th through 22nd. For more, I'll get you a website for more information as soon as that's available online. And then at the end of October, the Southern Appalachian Prophecy Conference. Southern Appalachian Prophecy Conference. This is at Freedom's Light Church of God in Ball Ground, Georgia. Russ Dizdar, Josh Peck, Sharon and me, and Pastor Bill Flynn, among others. For more information, log on to the website for Freedom's Light Church of God. That's, I believe, Freedom's Light Church of God, all one word, freedomslightchurchofgod.org. And again, that coming up at the end of October, the 25th through the 27th. And our October, speaking of October 2020, that is the time frame for our next Tour of Israel, the SkyWatchTV Tour of Israel, October 12th through 25th, 2020. For information and early registration, log on to lipkintours.com. Please leave us a review at Spreaker, Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever else you find us, which is, as always, wherever fine podcasts are sold. Or give us a like at the View from the Bunker page on Facebook. A View from the Bunker, production of Gilbert House, and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Our opening theme is Iron Bacon by Kevin MacLeod. His website, www.incompetech.com. Our opening announcer is DC Good. Why do we do this each week? Because we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Back live again next Sunday night, 7 p.m. Central Time, UTC -6 at vftb.net. This is A View from the Bunker. I'm Derek Gilbert.